Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with the Middle and New Kingdoms. This will be section 3 from your textbook, and all of this is from chapter 11. Okay. All right, so during the Middle and New Kingdoms, order and greatness were restored in Egypt. The Middle Kingdom had very stable government in between periods of disorder and chaos. The New Kingdom is the peak of Egyptian trade and power, but just like all of the other civilizations and time periods we've studied, that does not last forever. Work and daily life differed among the different social classes. Pharaohs are a declining power during the Old Kingdom. At the end of the Old Kingdom, wealth and power of the pharaohs declined. In time, nobles gained enough power to challenge the pharaohs, and by about 2200 BC, the Old Kingdom had fallen and local nobles ruled for the next 160 years. Around 2050 BC, a powerful pharaoh defeated his rivals, reuniting Egypt and beginning the Middle Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom is the period of order and stability that lasted about until about 1750 BC. Around 1750, the Hyksos from Southwest Asia invaded and conquered Lower Egypt, and they ruled the region as pharaohs for about 200 years. The New Kingdom, this is the peak of trade and military power in Egypt. In the mid-1500s BC, Amos of Thebes drove the Hyksos out of Egypt, and this began the start of the New Kingdom. This is where Egypt will reach its height with its power and its glory and its wealth. Egypt's leaders conquered a large area, including the kingdom of Kush, which was located south of Egypt, and we marked that when we did the map activity at the beginning of the unit. By the 1400s BC, Egypt's empire extended from the Euphrates River to southern Nubia. As the empire expanded, obviously they're going to start trading with more places. And with more trade, you get newer goods, different types of people you're going to come into contact with. So conquest brought Egyptian traders into contact with more distant lands and profitable trade routes. They were making more money. And this developed from Egypt trading with these other lands. We also had more trade routes that were growing. And a trade route is a path that is typically followed by traders. To connect that to your world today, think of a trade route as like an interstate. So Interstate 80, Interstate 39, you always see semis on those roads. They're carrying goods to stores and other places that will be purchased, whether it's a grocery store or whatever. So they are a newer version of trade routes. Back then, obviously, they're not going to be paved. They're not going to have semis and stuff driving on them. They're just going to have people transporting goods. One of Egypt's rulers who worked to increase trade was Queen Hatshepsut, who used the money gained from trade to support the arts and the architecture. So there are different invasions of Egypt. The Hittites, if you remember, we talked about the Hittites during the Fertile Crescent unit. In the 1200s BC, the pharaohs Ramses, that's a typo right there, that should be an M, sorry. He's also known as Ramses the Great, fought the Hittites from Asia Minor, and it was basically a stalemate, which meant that neither was able to defeat or beat the other person. And Tehenu invaded the Nile Delta. Remember, that is in the area of Lower Egypt. And were defeated by Ramses. They built a series of forts to strengthen Egypt's defenses, and Tehenu was defeated again when they invaded a century later. The Sea Peoples, soon after Ramses the Great died, the Sea Peoples invaded. They crushed the Hittites and destroyed the cities in Southwest Asia. The Egyptians turned them back after 50 years of fighting. Now, the different types of social classes, they are going to have different lives, okay? They're not going to have the same type of schooling. If they do have any schooling, jobs, living situation, they will differ between the different classes. Scribes, remember, those are people that learn how to write whatever it is. They worked for the government and the temples. They kept records and accounts, and they wrote and copied religious and literary text. The artisans, they worked for the government and temples as well, but they made things. They were creative, whether they were sculptors, builders, carpenters, jewelers. They made things that the wealthier people would like to purchase. The architects and artists, they designed the temples and royal tombs. The artists worked for the state and temples and painted the walls of the pharaoh's tombs. So you had architects that would design them, and the artists made them beautiful on the inside. Merchants were a small group of Egyptians that were traders. So they were the ones that traveled along those trade routes to the different areas that they were trading with. And they were usually accompanied by soldiers, scribes, and laborers. The soldiers were obviously for protection. The scribes were to keep record of who we sold to, the prices, what they were trading. Now, soldiers, it was a professional army, so they received land as payment. So instead of getting money, they got land, and then they were able to make money off of their land. They kept any captured treasure. So if they went in to invade a group of people, they would divide that up amongst themselves, a portion of it. And they could earn promotions. Farmers and peasants, that was a vast majority of Egypt's population. They had to work their land, and then they turned in their crops, and that served as their taxes. And they worked on special projects for the pharaoh. So they just did the jobs that the others did not want to do or just chose not to do. Slaves, those are the lowest. They worked farms, projects, workshops, and homes. They had some legal rights, and they could possibly earn their freedom. Most families lived in their own homes. The men were expected to marry young so they could start having children. And most Egyptian women were devoted to their homes and families. Some women had jobs outside the home, serving as priestesses and working as royal officials, administrators, or artisans. The women were actually allowed to own property, which is pretty forward thinking for a time period like that. They made contracts. They were allowed to have divorces, and they could even keep their property after a divorce. So the children's lives were less structured. They hunted and played with toys. At school, they learned morals and writing and math and some games and sports. But at age 14, most boys entered their father's profession, and they were done with their schooling. That is it for section 3. So go ahead and fill in the notes activity page that was assigned with this. And we will later move on to talk about some of the achievements.